They say a father's love is supposed to be unconditional, but mine came with fine print. Be quiet, be perfect, and never outshine your brother. When I walked down the aisle on my wedding day, there was one empty chair in the front row, my father's. He said he had work. I smiled through it, pretending it didn't hurt. But that night, when the music faded and everyone went home, I cried harder than I had in years. Fast forward 3 years, I'm driving down the California coast in my brand new $135,000 Porsche, wind in my hair, heart finally steady. I'd built a life no one thought I could. And then, my phone buzzes. Mom, we need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow. She pauses before hanging up and adds softly, your father will be there. I didn't know it then, but that meeting would change everything. Hey, my name's Laura. I'm 42. A small business owner, wife, and the woman my father once called the quiet one. Growing up, I was the kid who did everything right, never got in trouble, never talked back, always the first to offer help. But in my family, quiet didn't mean good. It meant invisible. My father adored my brother, Mike. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong even when he did plenty. Dad bragged about him to anyone who'd listen, his business sense, his natural charm. Me? I was the one who made sure the house stayed together when Mom got sick, who paid for her medications in college by working double shifts at a diner. But none of that counted in Dad's eyes. I used to think if I just achieved enough, he'd see me. So I worked harder than anyone I knew. I studied, built my own marketing business from scratch, and poured my heart into it. When I met Daniel, my husband, it felt like the universe finally whispered, you've done enough. Laura, you deserve happiness. But the day I called home to tell my parents I was getting married, Dad's voice went cold. You hardly know the man, he said. I'm not wasting a Saturday on another one of your impulsive ideas. Impulsive. That word burned. I'd spent my entire life calculating every move just to prove I wasn't reckless. The wedding day came anyway. Small, intimate, beautiful. My mother came, sitting stiffly near the front, pretending not to notice the empty chair beside her. That empty chair, it was louder than the music, heavier than the vows. I smiled for photos, but when the guests left and the lights dimmed, I stood in that reception hall alone, staring at that chair. And I made myself a promise. If my father could ignore the best day of my life, I'd make sure he'd never ignore me again. So I worked. I built my company from nothing. Late nights, no vacations, learning how to do everything myself. There were years when I thought I'd break under the weight of it. But I didn't, I grew, and slowly success came. Clients, recognition, money. Enough to buy the car I'd once dreamed about. A sleek silver Porsche 911, $135,000 brand new. It wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming something. A symbol of every moment I'd swallowed my worth. The day I picked it up, the dealership manager asked if I wanted a photo. I laughed and said sure, leaned against the car, sunglasses on, California sun behind me. Later that evening, I posted it online with a simple caption, hard work pays off. I didn't expect much, but within hours, my phone started buzzing. Old friends, coworkers, even Mike commented, wow, look at you. Then came the call I didn't see coming, Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost shaking. Laura, she said, your father and I, we think it's time for a family meeting. Tomorrow, can you come by? For a long moment, I couldn't speak. After years of silence, one Instagram photo suddenly made me worth a family meeting. I wanted to hang up, but something in her tone stopped me. It wasn't just guilt, it was curiosity, maybe even fear. I said, sure, Mom, I'll be there. And as I hung up, staring at that gleaming Porsche in the driveway, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, they wanted to see me. They had no idea what I was about to show them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning in circles. Every emotion I'd buried for years clawed its way up. Disbelief, anger, and that pathetic little flicker of hope I couldn't kill. What if this really was about something more? What if Dad had finally realized my worth? Then reality hit me like a cold splash of water. My father didn't suddenly grow a conscience because of family love. He saw a Porsche. I rolled over and sighed, trying not to wake Daniel. But he stirred anyway, reaching for my hand. "You're still thinking about the call," he murmured. I hesitated. It's been years, and now suddenly they want to see me? After ignoring my wedding? After pretending I didn't exist? Daniel's thumb traced small circles on my palm. "Maybe they finally see what you've built," he offered gently. "Yeah," I said bitterly. "Because success looks shinier in silver with leather seats." He chuckled softly but didn't argue. That's what I loved about him. He let me vent, even when it came out raw. A memory flashed through my mind. Me at 22, standing in the driveway with my first car, a beat-up Honda Civic I bought after working 3 jobs. I remember Dad looking it over, then glancing at Mike's used pickup and saying, "Now that's a smart purchase. Practical." He turned back to me with that smirk of his. "Laura, you waste money on dreams. Dreams." That word used to sting. Now it fueled me. I sat up, pulling the covers off. "I'll go," I said quietly. "But I'm not going there to explain myself or to beg for validation." Daniel leaned on his elbow, half asleep. "Good, go on your terms. Don't give them the power to make you small again." That sentence stuck to me like glue. Don't give them the power to make you small again. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet longer than I'd care to admit. I didn't want to look flashy. That would feed their assumptions. But I also wasn't showing up in the same dull tones I used to wear to keep peace. I settled on something simple yet strong. A cream blouse, navy slacks, hair pulled back, small gold earrings. Understated confidence. Then I turned to the Porsche keys sitting on the counter. They glinted in the morning light like a challenge. I smiled to myself. Before leaving, I called Mom. Part curiosity, part test. She answered on the second ring, breathless like she'd been waiting by the phone. "Hi, honey," she said quickly. "I'm so glad you're coming tomorrow. Your father's... well, he's been wanting to reconnect for a while." I could almost hear her twisting her wedding band. She always did that when she lied. "Has he now?" I said lightly. "He sure had an interesting way of showing it." "Laura, please," she whispered. "You know your father. He's stubborn. But he's proud of you. He really is." I didn't argue. I just hummed, let the silence stretch. We both knew what this was. After hanging up, I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the world outside. Joggers, school buses, morning light catching on the hood of that car. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about closure. About walking into that house not as the overlooked daughter, but as a woman who had built her life piece by piece. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. My hand shook when I imagined facing him again. That same cold stare, that same dismissive tone. But this time, I wouldn't shrink. That's when the idea of a surprise hit me. Something subtle, meaningful, a small, unexpected moment that would turn the tables completely. I didn't want to walk in flaunting my success. I wanted to show it without saying a word, so I started planning. I made a few quiet calls, one to a friend who worked with my company's charity arm, another to my assistant, asking her to prepare a small folder for me. Nothing flashy, just truth on paper, the lives I'd helped, the people I'd employed, the communities we'd rebuilt. That folder would come with me, tucked under my arm like a weapon made of grace. The rest of the day, I prepared not with anger but calm intention. I even detailed the car, not for them but for me. Every reflection in that polished metal reminded me how far I'd driven from that girl they ignored. Tomorrow, I'd drive up their street not as a daughter craving approval, but as a woman who'd outgrown their silence, and maybe, just maybe, I'd bring one surprise they'd never see coming. The day before the so-called family meeting, I took the Porsche out for a long drive. No destination, no rush. The sun hung low over the Pacific, turning the water into liquid gold as I wound along the cliffs outside Santa Barbara. The car purred beneath me, steady and strong. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my past starting to slip away with every mile. I parked at a scenic overlook where the ocean stretched forever. The wind tangled my hair, and I stood there just breathing, remembering that young woman who used to beg for her father's approval. The one who'd double-check her tone around him, who'd apologize for being too ambitious. I barely recognized her now. That's when I realized my surprise couldn't be the Porsche. That wasn't the victory. The real proof of who I'd become wasn't parked in metal and leather. It was in people. the ones who'd stood beside me when no one else did. So I opened the trunk and pulled out the small folder I'd prepared. Inside were photos, the women I'd mentored who now ran their own small businesses, the team members who started with me when I was working out of a one-bedroom apartment, the community garden we funded last year for single moms who needed a fresh start. That folder was my legacy. My real inheritance, not the kind written into wills, but built through heart and grit. As I stood there flipping through the pages, my phone buzzed. Mom again. I hesitated before answering. "Hey, Mom," I said. "Oh, good, you picked up," she rushed. "I just wanted to make sure you're still coming tomorrow." "I am," I said carefully. "You sound nervous," she sighed, the kind of sigh that sounds like she's been carrying something heavy. "It's just, your father's been under a lot of stress. The business isn't what it used to be. Your brother's been trying to help, but I felt my stomach tighten." "Wait, what's going on with the business?" She paused, long enough for me to fill the silence with my own suspicions. "They lost a few contracts. The bank's asking questions. Your father doesn't like to talk about it, but, well, he thought maybe you could give some advice. You're good with, money things?" There it was. The truth behind the sudden family meeting. Not reconciliation. Rescue. I looked out at the water, the calm waves rolling in like nothing had changed. A bitter laugh escaped me. "So that's what this is about," I said softly. "They don't want me back. They want my help!" "Laura," Mom said quickly, "that's not fair." "Your father," Mom, I cut in gently. "I'm not mad. I just wish it were for the right reasons." She didn't answer. We both knew there was nothing left to say. After the call ended, I stood there for a long time, letting the truth settle. The little girl inside me wanted to scream, to throw that folder into the wind and drive until the road ran out. But the woman I'd become? She smiled, because this time I held the cards. I sat back in the car, opened the glove box, and slid the folder inside. My quiet counter move. Tomorrow I wouldn't show up begging for affection. I'd show up as the woman they had underestimated for decades, the one who built her own empire when theirs started to crumble. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Porsche's headlights lit up the road home. I whispered to myself, half a promise, half a warning. They wanted a meeting. They're going to get one. The next afternoon, I drove up the old cul-de-sac where I'd spent my childhood. Same oak trees, same cracked sidewalks, same faded mailbox that still had the Harris family stenciled in peeling white paint. Only this time, the low growl of a $135,000 Porsche echoed through the quiet street, turning every curtain into a set of spying eyes. When I pulled into the driveway, my brother Mike was outside fiddling with the old basketball hoop. His mouth actually dropped open. "Holy, Laura? Is that yours?" I smiled, stepping out, keys dangling casually in my hand. Last I checked, yeah. From the porch, Dad stood frozen, hands shoved deep in his pockets, that same assessing stare he used when I was a kid showing him my report cards. For once, though, he didn't look critical. He looked unsettled. Mom hurried out, all warmth and nerves. "You look wonderful, sweetheart," she said, hugging me a little too tightly. "Come on in. I made coffee." Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The ticking grandfather clock, the faint scent of lemon polish, and those family portraits lining the hallway. All smiles, all pretending. I sat at the kitchen table while Mom fussed with cream and sugar, and Dad circled around the room like he was waiting for the right opening. Finally, he cleared his throat. "So," he began, too casually, "your mother mentioned your business has been doing—" "Well, it has," I said, folding my hands. He nodded, gaze dropping to the table. "That's good. That's real good. We were wondering if maybe you could advise us on some financial matters." The air went still. Even Mom stopped stirring her coffee. I looked at him for a long moment. "So this isn't really about family, is it?" Dad's jaw tightened. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd brought, the one I'd prepared at that overlook. I slid it across the table slowly. The sound of paper against wood sharpened the silence. "Before we talk about anyone's finances," I said quietly, "I want you to see this." Dad frowned but opened it anyway. Inside weren't spreadsheets or investment reports, just photos. Me with my employees, smiling in our first office. A charity ribbon cutting. A letter from a single mother thanking my company for giving her a job. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad stared, confused. This, I said, leaning back, is what I've built. Not a business, I'm a community. I don't need to prove myself with a Porsche. That car just got you to notice what you ignored for years. Dad finally looked up, his expression caught somewhere between shame and pride. Laura, I didn't mean… I know, I interrupted softly. You didn't have to. I figured it out. Then I let my surprise land. One of your employees, Tony Ramirez, reached out to me last month. He said things were getting hard at the shop. I offered him a consulting position. Full-time, benefits, steady work, Dad blinked. You hired Tony? Yes, I said. He starts Monday. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Mom's eyes glistened. Mike looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. And Dad, the man who had once told me I wasted money on dreams, just sat there speechless. I smiled, not out of smugness, but peace. My success didn't make me bitter, I said softly. It made me better. For once, nobody had a comeback. The only sound in the room was the faint ticking of that old clock, the same one that used to count down the seconds until I'd disappoint him again. But this time, it was counting something new, the moment he finally saw me. If you've made it this far and the story's got you hooked, don't forget to subscribe and tap that little bell, because what happens next might just surprise you. I left their house the same way I'd arrived, calm, steady, no fireworks. The Porsche purred in the driveway, its low hum filling the awkward silence between us. Dad followed me out to the porch, hands still shoved in his pockets. His eyes softer now than I'd ever seen them. For a moment, I thought he might say something like, I'm sorry, or I was wrong. But he just nodded once and said quietly, You did good, kid. It wasn't an apology, but somehow, it was enough. The drive home felt different that evening. The same streets that once held so many painful memories seemed smaller now, not because they'd changed, but because I had. I didn't need his approval anymore. I had already given that little girl inside me the validation she'd been waiting for all along. Months passed. Life moved forward. My business kept growing, my team expanding, my days filled with laughter, plans, and purpose. One afternoon, Mom stopped by the office, unannounced. Carrying her old tote and a shy smile, she wandered through the space, taking in the energy. The framed photos on the walls, faces of women and men whose lives had intertwined with mine, each one a story of second chances. She paused at a photo of me standing beside Tony, the man I'd hired from Dad's shop. You've built something beautiful here, she whispered, eyes glistening. Then she hesitated, fingers brushing a picture frame. Your father? Saw your interview on the news last week. He said he's proud. The words lingered in the air, tender but fragile, the kind that could disappear if you breathed too hard. I smiled, steady and sure. That's good, Mom, I said softly. But even if he hadn't, I know who I am now. That night I drove home along the coast again. The sunset spilled across the horizon in shades of gold and rose, reflecting off the Porsche's hood like a quiet promise. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained, and how sometimes peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from letting go. As the road curved along the ocean, I rolled down the window, felt the wind on my face, and whispered to the waves, It's not revenge that drives me anymore. The engine hummed, smooth and alive, its peace, hard-earned, self-made, and shining. Fade out.